There's a new strength and conditioning coach in town, and that completes the set of hirings that Don Waddell needed to do to replace the guys that he let go at the end of the season. We're going to talk about why all these moves were made, and honestly, it's all for one reason. So we're going to talk about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. So let's get into the episode proper. Because there's a lot to talk about, and it's not all like new news. In fairness, it's kind of been coming out over the past 2-3 weeks. A lot of new additions to the hockey operations department. A lot of guys were let go at the end of the season or told that their contracts weren't being renewed, basically. And there were some surprising names in there, so we're going to go through who got fired, why they got fired, or I'm using fired as shorthand so I don't have to say contracts weren't renewed or were let go every single time, but like the guys that are leaving / left, and then we'll talk about their replacements. And there's one key reason, I think, as to why all of these, or almost all of these changes has happened. One of them I'm still confused by, but we'll get into that. Before we do all that, I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Let's talk about the Blue Jackets. So at the end of the season, the Blue Jackets had, according to this article from the Columbus Dispatch, there were 51 people who had expiring contracts with the organization, and that's, support staff, coaches, front office, and all that kind of stuff. Some guys got extended, so 3 of Dean Everson's assistants, I believe the 3 newer guys, the 3 not new guys. So the new guys will have signed multi-year extensions when they were hired with Dean Everson last season, but so Steve McCarthy, Nicholas Backstrom, and Jared Ball all got extensions. Add that to Mike Haviland and Scott Ford, I believe his name is. I might have been. Yeah, Scott Ford. I said it and then was like, am I making that dude up? No. So they were both hired at the same time as Everson. They signed extensions last year. So the coaching staff is all done, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of guys didn't return. So the main ones, strength and conditioning coach didn't return. Kevin Collins, he's been with the organization since 2010. Video coach Dan Singleton and equipment manager Jamie Healy, who were both original Blue Jackets. They've been with the team since 2000. And also assistant athletic trainer Naoto Goto also won't return after all of their contracts expired. So they were not fired. They just were not. Their contracts were not extended. And some of this makes sense. Some of it does not make sense necessarily. But I wanted to kind of go through and talk about why I think that some of these guys will let go. Because some of it's pretty obvious. And some of it is less obvious, I think. So the big one, obviously, is Jamie Healy, who, by all accounts, beloved by everyone at the Blue Jackets. Like I said, original Blue Jacket. Has been replaced with Paul DeFazio, who was a previous equipment guy with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, this is kind of a notable hiring because I feel like Sidney Crosby famously picky about his gear, right? Like, we've seen the gross 1,000-year-old jockstrap. We've seen the shoulder pads that he's been using since he played in the QMJHL, right? Like, the man is particular about his gear. So the fact that he is calling Rick Nash up to be like, hey, this dude is good with equipment. He does my skates. He was, Sid's skate guy for the amount of, for the entire time he was with the organization, basically. That to me feels like pretty good. Like that's a pretty good reference, right? Like, is that not like the best reference that you could have? If Sidney Crosby is calling you to be like, hey, you should hire this guy, he's so good at sharpening my skates. Because I feel like, again, Sidney Crosby, he's going to be particular about his skates. I'm shocked that he has ever bought new skates. I mean, I'm not, like, skates wear out, but like, he's still wearing a model of skates that I don't think is manufactured anymore. So that is a really promising hiring. Now, the firing of Jamie Healy, specifically, does seem weird because, again, the team loved him. He's been with the organization since day one, basically. And as far as I can tell, like, was pretty well respected around the league as an equipment manager, right? This is key to one of the two problems that the Blue Jackets had last season, and one of the problems that the Blue Jackets have been having for the past, maybe like 5 seasons, I feel like. Maybe less than that. At least 3 seasons, anyway. And that is the Blue Jackets have struggled with injuries. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the strength and conditioning coach in a second here, but one of the things that causes injuries is improperly fitting equipment, poorly maintained equipment, like just not getting the correct equipment, right? And I don't know that this is a cause of injuries in the Blue Jackets organization specifically. Obviously, I don't know why all these injuries are happening, but I do know that in sports, this is one of the more common ways to sustain an injury, especially in terms of like things like shoulder injuries. You get injured with, like, your shoulders get injured more if you are not wearing proper shoulder pads, right? Like, I say this as someone who didn't wear shoulder pads when he played beer league, and it was a stupid move, but it was a non-checking league, and I wore elbow pads, so I wasn't going to shatter my elbows, and I felt fine about that. But if your shoulder pads are not seated properly and you either get hit into someone or you get hit into the board, and your padding is in the wrong place, like that's not going to do you any good. And obviously the Blue Jackets had, 2 separated shoulders at the beginning of the season. Both Boone Jenner and Erica Branson, I believe, both suffered separated shoulders, which is, again, you can't prevent that just by getting better padding, but having poor padding or badly fitting or, poorly maintained padding definitely exacerbates that, right? I believe Kevin LeBanc also had to get shoulder surgery. I don't know if it was a separated shoulder, but I do believe he also had a shoulder injury. So that to me, I think is partially why Jamie Healy was let go, or like the injury side of the potentially poorly maintained kit. And I'm not saying that this is Jamie Healy's fault, right? So, like, if anyone who knows him is listening, or if Jamie Healy himself is listening, like, I'm not sitting here blaming you. I'm just like, this to me feels like something that Don Waddell is looking at as like, right, well, we've got a lot of injuries. We need to fix the fact that we've got a lot of injuries. Here is something that we can do to try and mitigate all of these injuries, right? The other thing about the equipment is it feels a lot like Don Waddell basically canned everyone that was going to be or that was involved in like the Blue Jackets performance in back-to-backs. And again, I think a lot of the back-to-back performance was a team issue. I don't think it was any one specific thing, but obviously if you are, packing up immediately after a game, you've got to get on a plane, you've got to fly to sometimes a different country, sometimes you've got to fly across, several state lines. It's a long trip, you've got to unpack, you've got to get ready to go. Again, I think equipment manager is going to be one of the guys that's in the line of fire for, well, why weren't they ready to go? Like, and again, I don't think that this was a direct, like, I don't think this was a specific Jamie Healy thing, but I can also see Don Waddell, like, arguing that the equipment manager was one of the reasons the Blue Jackets were not put in the best position to succeed at back-to-backs. And again, this kind of follows along with some of the other, like, not contract renewals. So I don't necessarily think that like the strength and conditioning coach again, I think is a thing here. The video coach we're gonna get into because I think that this is a separate thing entirely. I don't think this is because of injuries or back-to-backs. And I'm still kind of confused by that. But I believe they also, and I don't have the name off the top of my head, but I believe they also got rid of the quote unquote game day coordinator or the like road trip coordinator, whatever it is. Basically, the person that deals with like hotels, transport, make sure all the players are where they need to be, when they need to be. That like the organization hires someone basically to be an adult on a road trip. And they know they have the itineraries of everything and everyone, and they know who's supposed to be where, and they're organizing. They're in charge of organizing food, and they're in charge of coordinating again, like the packing and unpacking of equipment, all of that stuff. I believe it was Julie somebody. I don't have the name in front of me. I'm very sorry about that, but she was also let go. So presumably they are going to hire a new person to do all of that. And again, that goes back to back-to-backs. And the Blue Jackets, I believe most of their back-to-backs last year were the first game was at home and the second game was on the road, if not both of them on the road, right? I understand, again, wanting to change things up, wanting to fix that because it was like, I think the Blue Jackets had one back-to-back win. Or like they had one win on the second half of a back-to-back all season, and it was that one at the very end of the season against that home and away against Washington that Jack Reese played in both games of. I believe that was the only time that they won the second half of a back-to-back all season. Like they might have won one more, but it got to the point where it was like mid-March and they hadn't done it yet. So again, like this feels like a really obvious and quote unquote easy way to try and improve back-to-back performance is to make the players' lives easier and to improve the road conditions, I guess is the word I'm looking for. They also were miserable on the road, just like in general. They were great at home. If they'd had the same record at home that they had on the road, like they easily would have been a playoff team. I'm just pulling up their road record now. The Blue Jackets had a record of 26-10-5 on the road. At home, and a 14-23-4 record on the road. So if the Blue Jackets had been as good on the road as they had been at home, they would have had 52 wins on the season, which I believe would have led the team. No, it wouldn't have led the league, but it would have been tied for second most wins in the league. So if they can bring that road record up, which I think is what Don Waddell is trying to do with these hires, that's fine by me. It sucks to let go of someone like Jamie Healy, who is a day one guy. And again, we'll talk about Dan Singleton in a second here. It was another day one guy, but like that's why the moves have been made, right? But those weren't the only moves that were made. So we're going to talk a little bit about the changing up of the video coaching department now and why that doesn't seem to be related to either of these two issues that the Blue Jackets had last season, which is injuries and road record. But we'll talk about that and why this move should help both of those things in just a second. First, I want to talk to you about Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat, and it's like having your own personal CFO. They give you full visibility and control over your finances. It's more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I love using something like Monarch. Like, it tracks all of the little things in my life. So it's like, hey, you spent this amount of money at McDonald's this month. Maybe spend slightly less at McDonald's. And that's been really helpful to like being aware of how many little treats I buy myself just to kind of get through my day-to-day life. But Monarch's been great at me cutting back on that, and I have been buying fewer little treats and saving more money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 50% off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. I want to talk about the video coaching because we're talking about all of the new hockey ops guys that have been either promoted or hired, and obviously they let Dan Singleton go. And this to me was the most confusing move because Dan Singleton was, I believe, not last season, but the season before last, I believe he had a perfect record in video reviews of how many times I believe it happened at least twice where they basically were like, hey, we think that there was a missed stoppage from a hand pass or a missed stoppage from it hitting the net or something. And, sounds wild, but and Dan Singleton, like that's his job, is he sits there and he watches and he rewatches and, he advises the coaches on whether to make these calls or not. Again, sounds like he's pretty highly regarded around the league as a video coach. This season, the Blue Jackets didn't have as good of a record. I believe they were about a 500 team in terms of video reviews. I don't know if that's because Dan Singleton was making these calls or if he was pushing for or against something and Dean Evanston said, no, we're going to do it anyway. But lots of calls going against the Blue Jackets in this situation, which is not ideal. And so again, I can kind of see why that would happen because again, like Don Waddell, we've seen this with the player side of things, right? Don Waddell is not precious about the prospects that were here before he got here. If Jarmo Kekalainen drafted them, he's not super interested in like loyalty to them. If he thinks he can make the team better, he's going to do that regardless of how he feels about, the prospects. He doesn't have that personal connection. And when I say personal connection, I mean like there's a drive that a GM has, I think, where they want their prospects to succeed in their organization, right? I don't think Don Waddell has the attachment to, it obviously didn't, to guys like Gavin Brindley, to guys like David Jiricek, who, are going to be playing on different teams this season. We'll see if David Jiricek manages to make it out of the AHL. We'll see what Gavin Brindley does in Colorado, etc. But again, similarly, Don Waddell's only been here for, 13, 14 months now. He is not as attached to guys like Dan Singleton as the previous GM and front office is, right? That being said, sometimes it's time to just move on. And I think what's really interesting is that they have promoted a guy into the head video coach of Aaron Augustitas, who I have notably seen in a lot of like behind the battles episodes talking to the team at intermission, which I thought was really interesting because I didn't see a lot of Dan Singleton doing that. It sounds like they basically rotated between assistant coaches from all different like aspects. So, Ball would speak, McCarthy would speak, Haviland, etc. But I noticed Aaron Augustitas speaking up a lot more than other coaches, and that might be like confirmation bias, it might be recency bias, I'm not sure, but I thought it was interesting. And now that they've promoted him to head video coach, I'm like, oh, okay, I think this feels maybe a little bit more like an Everson move than a Waddell move. I think because Everson deals with these guys in the day-to-day more often, I wonder if he went to Waddell and was like, listen, we're not going to keep Singleton. I like Augustitas. I think that we should we should bring him, like promote him, make him the main video coach. I'm going to be really, really interested to see what the video review situation is like for the Blue Jackets in the upcoming season. That's going to be something I'm going to be keeping an eye on, because I do think prior to this season, Dan Singleton was an excellent video coach. He got the Kepi, which was the previous to the donkey hat, at least twice last season, or the season before last, because of the calls that he made, of like, hey, this was offside 3 minutes ago, but players continued, so we're going to call it, and we're going to get that goal called back, right? Or missed hand pass, missed stoppage, whatever you want to say, right? So I'm going to be really interested to see what happens there. I don't know off the top of my head if the Blue Jackets had a better or worse record than like the average NHL team with their video reviews. And I feel like, and I know that every team says this, right? Every team is biased towards their team. It feels like every call goes the other way, regardless of what team, right? Like it's like every single team talks about the refs, right? Every single ref is biased against this specific team or towards the team that they're playing, right? And like I have been guilty of this in the past and try not to buy into it, because I know, again, it's Blue Jackets bias. I notice the calls against my team more than I notice. Like I notice missed calls against my team more than I notice the missed calls against other teams, right? I don't think it's that the refs are biased. I think they're just incompetent. So I'm going to be really interested to keep an eye on the video review and maybe try and track the record of them versus like the average NHL team next season. Because I do think if they have a massive uptick of, either goals being allowed or goals against being disallowed, like that was a move that was worth making. Also of note, this is not like a needle moving like thing, quote unquote, but Cambria joined as an assistant video coach. Now Cambria is actually the son of Flyers GM Danny Briere, and I didn't realize that he was anything to do with like video coaching at all. I believe he joined from a college team that he was running, who was, doing the video stuff for them. So again, I don't know that we'll see much of him, but there's your Augustitas replacement, right? So again, we'll see how Augustitas does. Hopefully great. But we'll see. The Singleton firing / contract not renewed was the most confusing one for me. Excuse me. Briere was the video coach of the ECHL's Maine Mariners and director of hockey operations. So he's clearly been, doing it for a while. I'm not expecting much like notable from him, but he does seem to know what he's doing. So we'll see. Going to take another quick break, and then I want to talk about strength and conditioning and hockey development as well, because that's the most fun. And honestly, then also the most recent. So we'll talk about the new strength and conditioning coach in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've talked about the guys that have been let go. We've talked about the guys that have been brought in. We've talked about the reasons that all of this is happening, which is namely too many injuries and a terrible road record. But here's the big one. Blue Jackets have a new strength and conditioning coach. This is the most important move, for me anyway, to combat both the injury issue and the back-to-back / road record issue. Because if guys are training incorrectly or are, injuring themselves or are suffering from fatigue, this all comes under the strength and conditioning kind of umbrella, right? The Blue Jackets have been so injured the past 3 seasons, right? And it's been a real problem for the Blue Jackets. Honestly, it might be the worst. This might be the worst thing holding the Blue Jackets back, right? I know we love to talk about how goaltending hasn't been good enough or how defense hasn't been good enough or blah blah blah. The Blue Jackets have been so injured. They lost 324 man games due to injuries this season. This was their 3rd straight season with more than 300 games lost, and a couple of seasons ago, they set a franchise record. They lost 565 man games due to injury. That was the season that they were rewarded with Fantilli for. They finished 31st in the league. Everyone was injured. Like, we were like, okay, well, like, surely they can't be that injured again. And in fairness, they weren't that injured, but a couple of seasons ago, they still lost over 300. Last season, 324. The Blue Jackets are not at the very top of the rankings for like man games lost, only because they don't have. So man games lost count as if a player is on the roster, regardless of whether it's on LTIR or not, that counts as a man game lost. So, for example, the Montreal Canadiens automatically get 82 man games lost because Carey Price was on their roster. Before they traded Shea Weber to wherever they traded his contract to, Utah maybe, that was another automatic 82 games lost. So they already had 164 man games lost before the season even started, right? Blue Jackets didn't have that. They had they had legitimate man game injuries, right? And I'm not, this is not the Montreal Canadiens are cheating at having a record. Like, that's not what this is. But I'm just using them as an example, right? But they just don't have anyone on LTR retirement, as they call it, yet anyway. Knock on wood. All of their guys have returned mid-season or have played at least one game. Even guys like Gabranson, who missed most of the season, he still came back and played, 15 games-ish for the Blue Jackets this season? Like, all of that stuff, right? They've been so injured. And some of these injuries, you can't condition your way out of broken bones, necessarily. You can condition your way out of muscle injuries, joint injuries. Like, do you remember there was, maybe 7 or so seasons ago, all of the goalies had groin injuries. Every single goalie. Like, Bobrovsky had a groin injury, 3 times a season. And it felt like, those are the things that you can strengthen condition your way out of. Chinakhov, I don't know what his particular injury was. I do wonder if there was some kind of strength and conditioning issues there. And again, you can't condition your way out of a separated shoulder necessarily, but like how you can mitigate that risk with better fitting equipment or better maintained equipment, you can also strengthen the muscles around the joints to stop you to stop those kind of things from happening. You're still going to get injuries, like blocked shots are going to cause injuries. Like, again, you can't condition your way out of a broken foot or a broken hand or whatever, right? But if you can stop the soft tissue injuries, stop the muscle injuries, that's immediately gonna put your man games down. Like, you're immediately gonna have a healthier team. And so that, I think, is the big, that's the big new hiring, like the new equipment manager. Like, I can see why they're doing it, but it's kind of, yeah, okay, whatever. A video coach, I don't think, is going to help either, like the injuries or the back-to-back thing, but the strength and conditioning coach is going to help the injuries, and I think he's also going to help the back-to-backs, because if you can, and I'm not saying that the back-to-back record was not because they didn't hydrate properly or because they didn't stretch properly before a game. Like, they're professional athletes. They know how to do these things, but I do wonder if part of the focus, now that they've got this new strength and conditioning coach, who comes very highly recommended, by the way, I'll talk about him specifically in a second here, is working on recovery and, working on specific little things, like little adjustments to the routine, whether it's getting, an extra hour of sleep, whether it's eating at a different time, whether it's, changing your stretching routine very slightly, whether it's losing weight, whether it's gaining weight, both of which can contribute to injuries and stuff. I know that Sergei Bobrovsky lost, I think, 20 pounds, and suddenly all of the groin injuries went away, right? So, that kind of thing is going to come from your strength and conditioning coach. The new strength and conditioning coach, again, comes very, very highly recommended. Actually, a former Blue Jacket, Barry Brennan, 62 years old. He worked with them from 2005 to 2010 and has been in the KHL for the last 12 years. He has been working with one of the best teams in the KHL, CSKA Moscow. has actually worked under Don Waddell before. He spent a season with the Atlanta Thrashers while Don Waddell was the president there. And Rick Nash obviously knows him as well. He played for the Blue Jackets while Brennan was in Columbus. Again, he's very well. He comes well recommended. I can't think what the word is right now. I've forgotten the word I was going to say, which happens so often. But he is going to be replacing Kevin Collins. And like, again, the hope here is that they can just get that injury number under 300. Like, I would take, like, the goal is, I think, to lose no fewer than 200 man games. Again, I don't know what the average for man games lost this season was, but like 200 man games lost in a season, I believe, is on average like 1 to 2 games per player, give or take. I'm not doing the math right on that. Almost certainly I'm not doing the math right on that. It's 200 divided by like 23. So yeah, like 4 maybe. But my point is, if they can get those man games down, guys will be healthy. You're not going to have Sean Monahan missing, several weeks. You're not going to have Ken Johnson missing a month. You're not going to have X, Y, and Z, right? And that's the most important hire. I don't think the old guy, Kevin Collins, is completely to blame for these injuries because, again, something you can't strengthen and condition your way out of. But this, to me, is the most obvious change to make in terms of, like, hockey operations, because you can straight up say, okay, well, they might have lost in back-to-backs for this reason or that reason or whatever. They got injured because of specific shortcomings. You can point to the injuries and say this was a reason the Blue Jackets weren't as good this year as they should have been. And the strength and conditioning coach is the first port of call with that, right? They've also hired a new massage therapist, which I'm assuming will also help. So it's all of the little things, and all of these little things seem like, okay, well, they're just making moves to make moves. Like when I was doing some research into this, I stumbled upon a Reddit post, which I know, like, it's my fault for going to Reddit anyway, but basically they were like, why are they making these moves? This just seems like some kind of money grab, like cost-cutting salary issue, and like I genuinely don't think it's that. Like, sure, are they going to enjoy paying these guys probably slightly less than guys that have been with the organization for 25 years are going to command? Like, this, I believe, is Aaron Augustinus' first time being the head video coach of anywhere, like especially an NHL team. He's like 12 years old from what I can tell in the videos, so like he's not going to command as high of a salary as Dan Singleton, right? So there might be something there. But to say that they're doing it just as a cost-cutting measure, I think is incorrect. I think Don Waddell has looked at the reasons this team was bad last year and gone, right, okay, injuries we can sort of control, back-to-backs we can try to control, right? And that's the moves that were made. The video coach I'm still not convinced by, but if they can get a better record than I believe the about 500 that they were this season, then I'm okay with it. Again, that's something I'm going to be keeping track of. But for the most part, I like these hires. I think, a change is as good as a rest sometimes. And the equipment guy, again, comes the most highly recommended it's possible to come, I feel like. And the strength and conditioning coach, again, has done a lot of good work for a lot of good teams. So all good things in terms of the new hires. We'll just see if they can fix some of the problems that the Blue Jackets had last season that were not correlated directly with poor player performance, right? Like, these things are not going to fix the fact that the Blue Jackets forgot how to score goals for the entire month of March, right? But they can fix the back-to-back problem. They can stop guys getting injured in practice, because I believe that, like, Boone Jenner got hurt in practice, right? If they can stop things like that and stop guys missing, 50, 60 games in a season, then it's worth doing, right? So I'm hopeful. I am cautiously optimistic about these new hires. I don't know that we'll see concrete proof that these things have improved because of the new hires, but, you know, sometimes correlation is causation, right? And we'll see how it goes. That's all I've got for today. We're still on 3 episodes a week, and we'll be, I believe, until the end of this month. I think September is when we go back to 5 days a week. So no new episode tomorrow. I'll be back Wednesday with a new episode, and keep an eye out for the 25 under 25 poll that's going to be dropping. If it hasn't dropped by the time this episode launches, it will be up by the end of Monday night, I hope. I'm going to knock on wood and cross all of my fingers and my toes and whatnot that I can figure it out by then. But Wednesday, we'll have a brand new episode for you either way. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. And you can find the show on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And until Wednesday, make sure you stay locked on.